So I want to thank all of you for coming this afternoon. And you have in front of you, if you don't have in front of you, I think you do, I want you to pick up this little pamphlet. And I want you to take a look through it. And you're going to see, for example, that we have with us today three exceptional alumni of the university. In fact, I think one of them graduated from the university. The other two graduated from one of the university was a college, wasn't that?
Yes, I
82?
graduated, it was a college.
I think it was a university.
Still university.
I think so.
Yeah, in 82 became a university. So my name is Dimitrios Spakis, and I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs. I've been at this institution longer than most of you have been alive. This is my 40th year. So these wonderful people here have been at this, came to Eastern when I was here at Eastern. So, and I intend to stay another 40 years. So you're going to come back a successful alumni. So it is my pleasure in some ways to moderate this conversation we're going to have. I know there are very few people, so I'm going to give an opportunity for conversation. The other thing I want to mention is that we're not going to go too long because I realize that Jim has a flight at 5:30, and so
Never miss a flight home.
never miss a flight. Okay, I never miss a flight. So let me just give you an idea. I'm not going to go over every single letter here, but to the very right there is Jim Girard, who is a graduate of Eastern from the year 1997. He graduated with a degree in business. He has had a wonderful, not only educational, but a wonderful career, professional career, at more than a number of different positions with the United Technologies, and currently with a very, very large firm in a multinational company with headquarters in Florida. And next to Jim is Anne, and Anne graduated back in 1979. She had graduated with a sociology degree, and she went on to earn a degree in law. And she had an incredible career in human resources and many other areas. And next to Anne is Andrew. And Andrew had a degree in economics. And I'm very proud to say that he was one of my students. Look at him, he still looks so young. And he went on to, he served in the military for a number of years. He also earned a law degree, and he has now his own private practice in the area of international accounting and the like, correct? Taxes. And so the way that I'd like to do it is this. First of all, I want them to tell us a little bit about how they think Eastern, in their own memories, how they think Eastern had an impact on their own professional career, maybe their own view of the work after graduating from Eastern. What was it as a path that they developed? What is this station that here they stopped at Eastern? What difference did it make? And then we'll talk a little bit about their own experiences and maybe ideas that they have and advice they may have for you as students. So let's start with that.
I mean, Eastern, I really enjoyed going here. It was an experience where it just allowed me, I felt like when I started at Eastern, I was kind of behind where I should have been. And I felt like I remember taking my first economics class, and I was like, well, what is the economy? I don't even understand what it is. Sociology class, what is society? I felt like, because I wasn't very into academic stuff in high school. I took extra gym classes and things, so I wasn't very academic. And coming here, it was really good to it was an open environment, and it allowed me to focus, and the teachers and Dr. Pakis, there was a bunch of other professors that I thought were great. And they really just allowed me to just expand and learn so much that it was really a welcoming environment that allowed me to just grow into things so much. And I think it's today, and it's a smaller school, which is nice, so you feel like you're not just mixed in a number. And even though it's a bit bigger than when I was here, I think there was less than 3,000 students when I was here, but it's still a small enough school that you can feel like you're not just lost in the numbers. And so I loved it going here, and it allowed me to build fundamentals. I mean, I remember English was my worst class, and I took some English classes, and some of the English classes just gave me such a solid foundation because I felt like I was such a bad writer. But taking some writing classes just taught me how to write just fundamentally well. And so I think that there's just so many different areas to expand in Eastern here. But that's all I really have to say on that topic.
Hi. I had a similar recollection that Eastern being a small school, you know, UConn's right up the street, and some of my friends were going there, and when I heard the numbers actually scared me, and I realized that I personally felt more comfortable in a smaller school. And so coming here, very much like my colleague has said, is that getting to know the professors and finding that they really cared, not just about what they were teaching, but about who you were. And I was not one to, like, even in high school, like, get really close to the teachers, but you sense that they were really educators. And I went to school, I was going to be a teacher, and I did become a teacher. But what I also gave when I was teaching was how I was taught. You know, the expression that you get what you give. I learned so much, not just academically, but about how to care for the students and how to educate and how to make people feel comfortable with the subject matter. The other thing was a sense of community. It was, again, physically much smaller, and I think same as what you said, the size of the population was smaller, but I am still friends with the people that I lived with in college. We're still, 40 years later, still friends. And that's a really good feeling. I mean, you know you've created a sense of community when you stay in touch for 40 years with the people that you went to school with. And I also played softball here, so it was a big sports community, and I'm going in about a month to Clyde Washburn's, induction to the Hall of Fame. And so I feel like I never left, even though there were blocks of time that, I probably wasn't associated with Eastern. I am now, I'm back, I'm on the foundation. So I think that's what drew me here, but more importantly, as you go on and as you experience school here, remember where you came from by giving back. That's a message that I want to make sure I get across, because it really is incredible. When you step away and look back, you're going to think, those are probably the best years of development that you have.
Jim?
Well, I'm going to repeat a lot of things that folks have said, but I went to Eastern same time my wife, my girlfriend, at the same time was a business student up at UConn. So it was interesting to compare and contrast, different, what she was learning and what I was learning. The smaller class sizes are clearly an advantage, and it's an advantage not just because it increases the rankings and all of the other things, but it is that connection with the professors and that ability for them to go off script into their personal experience and their knowledge and teach more than just the theory, because that is what will distinguish you. Everyone needs to understand that theory, and everyone can learn the theory by reading, but it's how do I practically apply this? How do I critically think about issues on my own, in my job, whatever that may be, that goes beyond and distinguishes folks? And I didn't realize that when I was here, that I was learning that, but as I think back I can think back to nearly every single class, and there were key lessons that had nothing to do with the theory that I learned and have made a difference in my career, and they go back to many less buildings. I'm kind of in between Modern State and some others here, but it's in these buildings and those those little additions that there's no way a professor teaching to 250 people would be able to give that critique, give that insight. So I look back very fondly, and I think you all have made a great decision to be here, but take advantage of those small opportunities to, think about how you apply what you've just learned.
So you graduate from Eastern, you get a job. What makes someone continue to strive? And all three of you went on and got graduate degrees. So what makes somebody, what are the elements? Did you think when you graduated from Eastern that some time in the future you're going to continue growing professionally and pursuing graduate work and so on? How does that work? Did you have that sense of urgency that I want to move up and be successful and give it my all in whatever profession I have?
I'll start by saying, so I went to law school at night. I was much older, and I was 40 when I went to law school. And I honestly didn't think I was smart enough. I thought only people who had money can go to law school and were really smart. And it was never a dream of mine, never, ever. I went to law school because in the career that I was in property and casualty claims. I was literally dealing with lawyers, and I was in the law, investigating and negotiating and settling claims, pretty big claims. And it just dawned on me that, if I want to get an advanced degree, maybe I should try a law degree. And I took it one step at a time. I did the LSAT prep, I did the LSAT, and I did pretty good. And you talk about self-doubt. I just never thought I would do that. I never had that dream. And then one step led to the next. And 4 years at night while working a full-time job, it still amazes me that I did it, but it's quite an accomplishment. And it opened up, having done that, it opened up a whole different world and career for me. Even though I was with the same company, I ended up doing something different than claims. I ended up as a compliance officer in the financial service part of the company. And I never, ever set out to do that.
But
So it's like I
Ann,
let
you
life
could have
take me.
stayed like many other claims officers.
Oh, I was doing great.
So what
doing
is
fine.
it that, other claims officers, they did not go to law school, maybe they never went for a graduate degree. What was it that made you think about continuing and challenging yourself?
Yeah. I think I'm pretty competitive, and I was looking around saying, if these people at the other end of the table can do what they're doing, and I'm essentially at the other end of that conversation, I can do that as well. And so I think that was, and nobody put the gauntlet down to challenge that. I think I did it myself.
Of course. What about you, Jim?
Well, I think, as many things, when you look back and you don't realize what you're doing or why you're doing certain things. But when I graduated, I needed to work, right? I couldn't continue to go on to graduate school. But I've become a big believer in that break, because I think graduate school, particularly in business, the theory is not terribly different than you're learning in undergrad. But the experience of understanding, the business world before you go back and you practice that next level of theory and that next level of thinking is very important. And, in business, I would say today, an advanced degree is a prerequisite wherever you go. But I think it is the traditional path of, a break between undergraduate and graduate school. But I don't know why I always wanted to do it. I was the first in my family to go to school, have a bachelor's degree, let alone go on and have a master's degree. But as I got into the workforce, it became apparent, there's so many things that you don't have control over, but, not allowing somebody to skip past me because I didn't have an advanced degree was something I did control.
Very good. Andrew?
I like learning things, and I felt like after I finished here at Eastern, I became an accountant, so I took some classes that I needed to take the CPA exam, and then I became a CPA, and I wanted to keep learning, and I did tax, and a lot of CPAs that do tax do go on to get their law degrees, and so I did that, and then A lot of people, a lot of attorneys that do tax go on to get their masters in law. So it just kind of seemed to fit. If you wanted to advance your career, those were the ways to do it. And it was nice because United Technologies, I worked for them when I went to law school, and I went at night just like Ann. And UTC paid for my law school. I went at night, they paid for everything. And then I worked at Pepsi while I got my master's in law. Again, I went at night, and Pepsi paid for a portion of it, not all of it, but they paid for a portion of my master's in law as well. So it really, I just kept wanting to go to more school and wanting to learn things. I enjoy learning things. Even to this day, I think that, one of the things I would encourage you guys after you graduate from here, keep learning. I mean, there's so much to learn, and the more you know, the more valuable you can be to other people.
So, I mean, there is the whole idea that Ann talked about being competitive and being competitive with yourself, which is the most important thing. And also the idea that I think all three of you are talking about, whether you get a degree, an advanced degree or not, that you have to be in competition with yourself. And you have to be a constant learner. And I'm sure even after you got your degrees, every single day is an opportunity to learn something. So how do you view learning now? I know you have your own business and you have employees, but how do you view learning at the workplace today? Is it all about running around and giving orders and finishing this project? But what about learning? The whole idea, we're telling these young people that they're going to be lifelong learners. Their success depends on having a mindset of learning. How does it work with you?
Well, I think it is, to be successful, you have to be a lifelong learner. I mean, there are only so many, the few things that you don't need to continue to learn and be successful at and to grow a career. But in a business world, you need to continually learn, because you are, just from a practical standpoint, you're always competing with others who are learning what's happening. And the world has changed, and in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, it will be different than what it is today. And the techniques and tactics of business, are changing as you go forward. But it's that internal drive, as you're saying, that I think it's very important. And I do many little odd things, but I'm a runner, and you get to talk to people about, what do you do when you run? What do you listen to? I listen to The Economist, and everybody looks at me like, what? That is got to be the most, why do you do that? Well, it's an hour in the day that I could easily waste kind of doing something else. And do I have an hour in the day to just sit down? No, I mean, I have 2 young boys. I don't have an hour to myself at any point in time, but it's something that I've dedicated myself to, that somehow I can keep learning and be exposed to something that I'm not, that I don't see every single day. And is it the most exciting thing, the Middle East and Africa section at mile 7? No, not really, but it's, it's something that I've done to, continue to learn. And it's those kind of little things, you learn about those things, and you make a point at a meeting, or you understand an issue, you get an edge, above what you're just asked to do kind of each and every day, so.
And I found when I took my first job, I came to school to be a teacher, and I became a teacher. So my first part of my career, 6 years, was teaching history and sociology. So I go my first job, and I was teaching what they then called gifted children, and so I think they call AP classes now, right? Advanced placement, but anyway. And I was told that the curriculum was, it was a Catholic school, and they wanted to challenge the students, was the history of South Africa, Brazil, and India. And I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't take any of those courses here at Eastern. You took the typical history and whatever. So I had to learn it before I taught it. So, and that's right out of school, right? You think you come prepared right out of school, right? I'm like, oh my God. So I got this motto that I had to stay 10 minutes ahead of the students. So I had to read, and I actually learned all about the history of South Africa, India, and Brazil in order to teach it. And so that was my first, real world, you don't know everything. Even though you just went to college, you think you know everything. I didn't know anything teaching this class. And they challenged me, these very gifted students. From there, I went on to claims, and claims and insurance claims, right? I'm like, what? insurance, like I didn't know anything about insurance. I didn't even know about, there was a summer job that lasted 28 years. So I'm like, what? So I had to learn about auto insurance and homeowners insurance and commercial insurance, right? And it dawned on me there too that everyone has to have insurance and no one knows what it's about. So I had to learn all about insurance before I can adjust a claim, you know? And then another career within the Hartford was this compliance. And it was all about the laws about how the financial service, you know, investment products work. And it probably about, you know, 30 years into my career, I'm starting to hear leaders of these organizations talk about the successful leader and what are the skills a leader has to have. And what always comes up, they don't say learning, they say you have to be curious. Curiosity is learning, right? So if you have a curiosity about something. So there's the leadership skills there too, that you're always interested in knowing more about whether it's the business or the law or the world, how it impacts what you're doing. So it never stops. You may stop getting tested on it, but you should never stop being curious.
In my job, I am required to know literally thousands of rules. There are just so many rules that I just can't keep track of them all. And I always feel like I'm behind and I have more to learn. And I remember, and I use this to this day, back at Eastern, I took a psychology class. And in the psychology class, they teach you about the psychology of learning. And they explain how there are, you know, if you learn something and then it's just like you guys should be studying for class, for your exams. You learn something in class, you should review it again sometime soon after, and then review it maybe the next day, the next week. You need to review it at strategic times, and it gets into your permanent memory. And I try to do that now to this day in my practice because I just have so many things that I'm trying to learn. And so, you know, Jim said that he runs and listens to things. Well, I have a treadmill that I get on, and I have a document in front of me, and I treadmill it's on the computer, but then I have it read to me over the phone as well, so that I can both read as I'm going along, and it's speaking to me the words in front of me both. And it's literally just reviewing the thousands of rules that I need to know. So, because I forget them. There's too many for me to keep all in my mind at once. So I have to keep reminding myself of these thousands of rules. But that's what so I'm always trying to learn more and more.
Before we scare them, okay? So, I mean, there's first, when you look at the resumes, they write up on each one of our panelists, you find out, you say, my God, is there a chance I will ever be able to get to that point? To, you know, be a VP for this and do that and earn a law degree, and everything looks so overwhelming. But what I wanted to get from the panelists is not really how many years it will take you to get to a particular point, but what really it takes. I mean, those general ideas, the general forces that shape somebody's future. And I'm not saying maybe they were lucky somehow. And there's a corner there, but they saw the opportunity, the luck really shined on them. Maybe they had somebody who was a mentor and a sponsor and somebody who liked their personality and liked their work ethic, whatever it was, and they took up, you know, advantage of those things. But there are some unique qualities that I think each one of them has. And we talked about the curiosity and the idea to learn and being in competition with yourself and looking at the opportunities around you and really roll up your sleeves and say, well, you know, if I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity, I got to do such and such. And this is what each one of them is still doing today. It's not, you know, 20 and 30 and maybe, you know, even longer than that, years later being a constant learner. So what about the issue of luck? And did you become lucky in your professional career somehow? Is it that you are where you are? Do you have doubts at times? Maybe I was one of the lucky ones. It doesn't have anything to do with what I've done. It just, I was lucky, and others were not lucky to be able to do the things that I'm doing.
I think everyone has people or situations they look back on that's just treated them, you know, favorably. But truly, I don't believe in luck. I believe luck is the intersection of opportunity and preparation.
Yeah.
And, you know, It's you being in a position and have done the work so that when the opportunity presents itself to you, maybe that opportunity that's being presented to you is lucky, but all of us have those opportunities. But have you done the work and the preparation to be able to take advantage of it when it becomes, in front of you? And folks sometimes will say, well, you were lucky, and yeah, I look at it, again, I'm very thankful of everything that I've had, but I don't know anybody that's ever outworked me. Many people have probably worked as hard as I have, but yeah, I don't think anybody's outworked me. And so when those opportunities come, you recognize them and you've prepared for them, and then you take advantage of them.
The intersection of preparation and opportunity. That's the luck in careers. What about you, Ann?
Yeah, that was good. I don't know if I could follow that. That was great. It was a good summary. I think for me, though, your personality plays a big role in you're part of another community when you go to work. You've got colleagues, and you have management, and you may have, clients you interact with. And so you got to be good at that. You got to be good at managing those relationships. I've talked to people that come to the business, new people come from a different company, and they may ask questions. I go, the first thing you need to do is make good relationships with your customers, with your clients, and be humble about it, and I think that's been very helpful. And it's really funny because I asked two of the people that report to me, I told them I was coming here, and I asked them a couple of the questions that you had asked, because I do like to collaborate. And I asked this one woman, I said, what do you think has been your success? And it's funny she said this, and it's so true. She said, I have no fear of taking on the jobs that no one else wanted. And I'm like, you're right. You have advertising review, which is like, no one wants to do that. So she said she was courageous in doing that. So, all right, I'll do it. I'll build that organization, or I'll put that together. And she wasn't doing it to be a hero. It was that was what she liked to do, and people recognized that. And that's her success. And I wanted to share that with you because it's very similar to me. I ended up doing a lot of things. All right, just give it to me. I'll take it. I'll be a part of that project. And you don't do it to show off. You do it to sort of, again, learn, satisfy your curiosity and build more relationships. The more projects you get involved with, the more people you meet. So, and that's kind of how I surprised somebody. I told somebody recently who was looking for a different job. I said, you know what, in my 28 years at the Hartford, I never applied for a job. And I had different ones. People always came to me. And that's unbelievable to say that in retrospect, that I never sat and interviewed for a job other than to start with the company. So, get your reputation out there, and people will come to you with opportunities.
Well, first, Jim said what I totally agree with what he said, and then what Ann said, and I would echo both of those. And I think that, there's opportunities aren't always like right in front of your face that day, but they come up periodically. And so you need to be prepared for it. Like Jim said, you need to prepare in your job. You need to do your job well and understand things, and then opportunities when they come along. And this is kind of what Ann was mentioning, was people will be saying, look, well, who do we want in this new job? Or if there's a job opening, who do we want to have fill it? Oh, well, this person's been doing a really good job and they seem to know what they're doing. Why don't we ask them if they want the job? So I think that it's really just preparing for, doing your job well and trying to just learn as much as you can.
See, one of the things that I want to do is just cut you down to size. I don't want the students to think that somehow you are superhumans who came through Eastern, okay? I wanted to show them that they actually are so close to it, if they only listen, pay attention to some of the things that it takes for what we call normal people, like all of us, to actually be able to succeed in the workplace and have not only succeed financially and have a high position, but also have rewarding careers. And I think that's important. And my sense is, at least in talking with all three of them, that their careers are not only rewarding financially, they're rewarding professionally and personally, and that's what counts quite a bit. So I don't want to take too long, but I want each one of you to just somehow give your own spiel about what do you think these young people should be thinking about the workplace, and how do you prepare for the workplace of today and tomorrow? How do you prepare? What kind of scary things do you need to think about?
I mean, one of the things that I have two daughters that are in college, and they both, one of them has learned Japanese and the other has learned German, and I really told them that I think it would be more important for them to learn a computer language than learning another spoken language. I mean, I've learned a computer language when I was in high school, in fact, and once you learn one computer language, it's actually quite easy to do other computer languages. And I think if you learn one computer language, it allows you to become more productive and more valuable to your employers. And so that's what I would encourage you guys to do. And it's not that hard it's a lot easier to learn a computer language than it is to learn some other spoken language. So that's what I would say.
What about you, Ann?
I don't know if I can learn a computer language. I have to disagree with you. I mean, that's where I draw the line. There are a
Yeah.
couple places, but I also draw the line in accounting too, so I don't think you and I would ever get along here. But that's great. My mother actually told me, and I hear it periodically, to get involved in as much as you can. So if you have that in you to be involved in a lot of things, that's what I would advise you to. So you have a job, but in the workplace today, it's not just your job anymore. So I'll give you an example. Where I work, they're big into community service, huge. It's one of the guiding principles that you need to give back. You need to be in the community service. So what do? I volunteer to be the executive sponsor of the community partners. I get involved we have like at least 20 different groups of outside of work. They're groups related to work, so that might be, a community of professional women's network. So what do? Get involved with that. When I was at law school, I got involved in the Italian Law Society. I'm like, well, what's that about? All I know is I had a bunch of Italian people that we all got together. We were in law school, and we got to walk down Fifth Avenue in the Columbus Day Parade. It was a social group. So getting involved satisfies the other thing I just told you before, getting a network of people and getting to know others. And so in the workplace today, it's no longer just work. You're there for 8 hours, but you will get taxed and pulled into different directions that are tangentially related to your work, but ultimately, will serve you well. So get involved. Don't be afraid to get involved. Don't just go home at 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Jim?
Well, I want to steal a couple things Ann has already said, is curiosity. That is something that will absolutely always differentiate you. Take the job and do the job, like Ann said, that nobody else wants to do. There's a range of tasks in every job. Some are sexy, and everybody wants to do them, and there's others that have to get done. First, be curious enough to understand them all, but go do the ones that nobody wants to do. That's going to differentiate you to any leader, because a leader needs to get them all done. You can't pick and choose. You need to get them all done. And pay attention to the basics as well. It's amazing to me, and I work for an incredibly brilliant CEO, the amount of work and products that get them that have typos, that people haven't thought through. Meetings show up on time. Those things, very little things that you take for granted, they're incredibly important, and it sets a particular discipline inside you that doesn't necessarily, differentiate you on a daily basis, but it will start to build, who you are as a person, and that you can be, dependent upon. So I would say, as Ann said, don't leave if you want to leave at 4 o'clock, that's fine, but realize that you're starting to make, choices and differentiate yourself from those who are willing to kind of go extra, especially as you're new to organizations. Be that person who volunteers for the bad task. Be that person who stays late. Be that person who's always on time. Never be late. and make sure your work product is always correct and can be counted upon. I mean, you want to be that person. I can count on one hand the people that have worked for me that I don't have to look at their work when they send it to me. And that's the type of thing that will differentiate you more than your degree, more than anything. Because once you get in that door, you want to be that person that when you send something to your boss or your teammate or whomever else, they don't even have to look at it because they are convinced you've done all the research, you've summarized it, you've written it properly, and you can send it on. And it's easy to say, but it's hard to do. Those types of things really differentiate folks when they get in the workplace, and it kind of separates, again, the theory, being intelligent, working hard, having the right classes, everybody has that. You need to get, a little bit more than that. And a lot of it comes down to personal traits. It really, really does.
So along the timing thing, I'm late for everything, and I'm always 10 minutes late, and I don't understand why I'm always 10 minutes late. I don't like it. I don't like it. So I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I set my watch 10 minutes fast. This is no lie, right? Now I show up 10 minutes before the meetings, and I'm coming in a banana peel, right? And I'm late. I'm thinking I'm late. And meanwhile, my watch has got me to be, they're like, no, Ann, you're 10 minutes early. And I've forgotten that I've set my watch. So anyway, it helped me stop being late.
I think what Jim was talking about, what we know nowadays, not only is the IQ that you need to have your basic intelligence, but also the EQ, that is the emotional intelligence.
Yes, very
you
much.
have the dedication, the self-discipline, the hard work ethic and so on, which is so important. I just want to, as a joke, I can tell you what differentiated me from many of my colleagues. I've never been late to work one day in my 40 years.
Wow.
Never. And it is something that was ingrained in me since I was a little child, okay? So that is part of the, the self-discipline part. And as I said to all of you...
Can I just say one
yes.
thing about EQ? When I come back here, I've come back several times to talk to the seniors, and I need to tell you guys all this. If you take a minute and read the book on emotional intelligence by Daniel Goldman, it is really an incredible book, and it explains to you what EQ is. And in business, when I'm interviewing people, I totally look for the emotional intelligence, the eye contact. Are you reading people properly? Are you reacting to it properly? It's incredible, and I literally judge people based on that interaction.
Because that's what we do. We
That's
judge
right.
people fairly quickly in the first few seconds, okay? The way they stand, the way they look at you, and so on. And
What they do with
And
that.
I'm not saying it's the end of somebody's career or life, but those things are very important, especially the issue of self-discipline and hard work and pride in your work. Nobody's going to do it for you. I remember way back when I used to teach students, and I would see somebody from another country who was correcting English, okay? And then people would say to me, when I'm CEO, I'm going to hire other people to do my writing. I said, no, there's no such thing. Because the writing is also your thinking. So the two things go together. So you learn how to write because you want to improve your thinking. So can I stop right here? Because I want to give an opportunity to the handful of people here to ask a question or two, okay? So if you don't have anything in mind, quickly think about a question. Yes, sir.
I have a question. Do you remember your most uncomfortable moment in Eastern, and how did you react to that moment, or where did it lead you?
Why don't you start, Andy? You told me something about that's very interesting.
I did?
Yeah.
What I did?
When your roommates and how you
Oh, that's
change
really,
somebody's life.
that's really deep.
It is.
So when I first came here, I came from, you have to understand my background, a big Italian family, good, a lot of food,
Yeah.
a really great foundation. So my first day of class here, or moving into Burnett Hall, I had two roommates, so, I met them that day. Because I think today you do things a little differently, like orientation in May. Okay, we didn't have that. Your first day was orientation, right? Back in the day. But anyway, the first woman said to me, hi, and she said me her name, and she said, and she's still my friend, by the way. She said, my parents are divorced, my father's an alcoholic, and I don't eat. And I went, what? You don't eat. I didn't know the word anorexic, but she was. And then the other one was sitting on the bed, and she was smoking a cigarette, because I guess you can do that back then inside the rooms, and she said, "I'm not gonna be here longer than 2 weeks, my boyfriend's getting out of jail and we're getting married." And this was my very first day. And I thought, my God, and she left, by the way, in 2 weeks, so we had a room, my roommate and I had a room to ourselves, the two of us, we didn't have to have 3 crammed in. And I ended up getting that woman to eat by November. And to this day, she thanks me for saving her life.
So that's where you show the true metal. What do you do? She could have asked, can I change room and so on, or you can take that one as reaching out and helping somebody. That's a big, big commitment. And most of the people would think this has nothing to do with work, this has nothing to do with life. It has to do with work, it has to do with life, 100%. So imagine what it means to save a friend, to make a friend for life, and save somebody's life at the same time.
And it was uncomfortable for me, because I didn't come from an environment, I didn't know any of that, I didn't have any skills to deal. Today, it may be different, it may not be take it upon yourself, but, that was my first day.
Yeah,
Can you think about an uncomfortable?
Yeah, yeah.
Roommates and everything. My roommate, my actual roommate, he told me like he's kind of antisocial and he doesn't like talking to people a lot and all that. So like I'm trying to like get him to talk to more people, and it's actually working out well. Like I had a long conversation with him yesterday, and I introduced him to some friends that he knows now. But like I'm still in the midst of like trying to get him outgoing more. So I think it's actually nice to try to take that risk to try to help someone out like that.
It is. Somebody once told me that in terms of education, it doesn't have to be a formal teaching, that it affects eternity. You help that person, that helps the next, then you just don't know where it stops.
Anybody else?
I don't want to follow
No,
that.
Yeah, mine is much less, but I was in the Marines before I went to college, and right before I left, they were trying to get me to renew, to be joined up for the Marines. And the recruiter told me, "You'll never make it in college." And so I started here at Eastern, and I had an 8 o'clock in the morning class with a professor, and it was like 2 weeks into the semester, and she gave a pop quiz. And I got a 0 on the pop quiz. And so I had been told I'll never make it in college, and my first quiz in college was a 0. And so, I just doubled down and just said, okay, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to study hard, and that was one of the worst points for me.
Yes, sir.
This one can be answered by one person because I don't want to take up too much time, but I'm just curious to one of you or all of you, what do you think, I understand that both are important, but what do you think EQ or IQ, emotional stability and the ability to portray yourself at a higher level over your actual intelligence is more important and which will get you farther?
First I'd say, further all depends on what people want to do. There's so many different avenues in business. And up here you have 2 folks that are in a corporate world and one who's an entrepreneur and on their own. And there's different skills and experiences in kind of each of those. I think your intellect, I believe, is something everybody can work on. This saying I'm not smart enough or somebody's smarter than me is, that's an excuse easy enough to give in. You can always learn. It may take you more time. You may have to approach it a different way. But, I think that's a piece that everyone can have to an acceptable, manner. And emotional intelligence in a leadership world and in a corporate America and in a corporate job, it is all about leadership. You rise to a certain level very quickly in your career where you cannot outwork an issue. You need a team. So you need to be able to attract a team, develop a team, have them continue to want to work for you, have them, want to go that extra mile for you, because it's your team that's going to determine your, ultimate, success. There's, a topic in the workplace we talk about a lot of, work-life balance, and I say to leaders all the time, your individual work-life balance depends on how good a team you have. If you don't like how many hours you're working or how you're not performing, it's directly related to your team and how you're doing as a leader. So how do you be a good leader? It's EQ more than it is IQ. But again, you got to have an IQ and you have to work hard enough to be at a certain level. And I would be hard pressed to be convinced that anybody, you know, again, I'm not somebody who learns things very quickly. I mean, I had to study and study throughout the semester. I always have hated the people that can read the book and, you know, and be done, and they just memorize everything. So that part, I mean, but you can outwork that. But the EQ is building your team and how you are as a leader, and understanding that, you know, people have choices, and, you know, your interaction with them, your caring for them, you know, as people is what will, you know, differentiate you.
And you gotta nurture both of them. I mean, you can be born with all kinds of talents and innate intelligence, but you gotta nurture both, the EQ and the IQ, and the one reinforces the other. So it's not that, I mean, if it was the case that people are going to be born with the EQ and the IQ and are set, we won't have this conversation, because then there is no point. We have this conversation because we know that there is an interaction of the intelligence, and the emotional quotient and the IQ. Those things have to work together.
I'm not an expert on this, but I think you could learn and understand and work at EQ more than you can IQ. I think you can. That's some of the readings I have. I personally, I'm a very tactile and emotional, not an emotional person, but it's so important to have the EQ and understanding how to interact with people. And it's exactly what Jim said, you know, unless you're going to have a job in which you work for your intelligence on your own, and that might be what's good for you, not necessarily you, but an individual. You've got to know how to work with people, for people, around people, and that's really where the EQ comes in. And I think you may also find some of the studies saying that some of your CEOs have the highest of EQs and not as necessarily the highest of IQs. So that would be my...
You have a question?
So I have two questions, but I couldn't decide which one I wanted to ask.
Do them both.
So I'm just going to ask both. What values did you guys fuse with your interests in order to find what, say, major or what career was right? Like, what values were there and which interests were you like, wow, I can't let this go, that you like put it together? You know, and then the second question is, like, did you have anyone kind of telling you, that's not going to happen? Like how you said, you know, like that's not possible, that you can't do that, you're not smart. Did you have people in your life putting you down?
So I never had anybody putting me down ever along the way. Parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, bosses, never. I never had that. But yeah, I continue to compete against myself, always. I always raise the bar on myself. So I never had to experience, I don't know how I would handle that, probably just...
Well, partly, you probably had it, but you simply ignored it. That's why you don't remember it, okay? There isn't a single person who does not get some kind of negative, demeaning kind of look or whatever, but some people have the capacity to really...
Did not even let it bother me. I don't think I could.
Yes.
My brothers didn't bother me, and now brothers can be annoying.
And for
They
some
never
people,
even-
if you get that, you get a badge of honor that you overcome this. So you're not allowed to get under your skin.
It could be. I'm going to share with you, though. I one time told one of my managers, we were going through our annual review, and it was towards the end of my career at the Hartford, and I was telling him, my God, the Hartford invests so much in training their leaders and making sure that you had the skills to be a manager or to be a leader. And I was always grateful. And I think out of my 11 leaders, I still remain friends with 6 of them. Long after, I wasn't friends necessarily at the time, but remained friends with them. And I was just going on. And he stopped me finally and said, "Did you ever think you were a good employee?" And I said, "No, never." You know, here I was praising sort of leadership, right? And I never even thought that maybe I was everyone's good worker, like, you know, I never got, I guess I can say I never got full of myself. The value that you asked, that value question, I never really put it in anyone's face that I could do something better, even if I knew I could. I mean, that was, I never wanted to make anyone else look sort of down or bad, because I didn't, you know, I didn't want to do that. I just knew I can do something better, and I would do it.
I always felt like people knew more than me, or people were doing a better job than me. And I was actually proud, the first day I started working at Pepsi, it was literally the first day, and I went into the vice president of international tax, and he was explaining to me how one of their structures worked at Pepsi. And he told me this tax rule, and I was like, no, that's not right. That's not the rule. And he looked it up, and he's like, you're right, that's not the rule. And it was just like, I was just so like happy that first day of the job, you know, just, oh my God, I just told my boss he's wrong, and you know, I was right, and so I was happy about that. But I had already been doing tax for like about 10 years at that point, so I was pretty experienced.
I'd say I've been fortunate that I've had people be supportive, or, as you said, I've just forgotten the ones that weren't. But I've always, you know, felt like Andrew said, I never knew, you know, enough. And I was first in my family to go to school. I went to high school at Wyndham Tech, right across the street. Nobody at Wyndham Tech goes on to college. I went to Three Rivers Community Technical College. Any college name that long is probably not one you're terribly want to be associated with. Came to Eastern, where I work at. I mean, I'm with people that, you know, the Harvard MBA is what to have, or if not, you want Wharton if you want a finance background. I don't have that. I went to RPI, good school, but not any of those. But it's the self-confidence. And arrogance, there's no place for arrogance in anything. But self-confidence is a different thing. And that's a piece, whether folks are putting you down, or it's just that self-confidence yourself to raise. I mean, there's a lot of folks in Andrew's situation that wouldn't have questioned their boss. But if you're confident in yourself and you know it and you do it in a respectful way, that's your contribution. You got to be comfortable doing that. And I couldn't follow Anne's story of her learning at Eastern, but mine was, there was a class, I don't know if it's still there. It was Business 400 or Business 410. It was a 6-credit class.
Yes.
You had to do. I did Capstone. I did PepsiCo, and that's when they still owned the restaurants and everything. And it was the end of that class. It was very daunting, right? Your whole grade is based on the end of that class, and it was a question and answer, and you had to get graded because you had to ask each other questions. So it was pretty cutthroat, you know, amongst the class. But when I was standing on the stage answering questions, and I answered them all. And it was kind of a seminal moment. We worked the whole semester. We're stressed the whole time, but wow, it's like the Karate Kid at the end of the movie. You know, it was like, wow, that's why I did all this work, and yes, I can do this, and I can be successful. But that was a real turning point, you know, for me after I got over the fear of being on the stage in front of 100 people. But you know, being able to answer all of those questions and understand, and actually our analysis was also to split up PepsiCo, which turned out we could have sold that for a lot of money instead of McKinsey. Yeah, exactly. But
You know, the other thing I just wanted to add here, I do this a lot, and I think I got these cards somewhere along the way at the Hartford in terms of leadership. There were these cards about qualities, and on one side of the card was a quality like, when you just mentioned it, a good quality to have is the passion, right, about something. But when it gets overused, you turn the card over, and the card says, when it's overused, it looks like aggression. So there are these cards of skills that are really good to have, but when you do too much of it, so self-confidence is great. Too much of it turns into arrogance.
Yep.
So think about the skills that you think are good skills, and when you do a little too much, how someone else how that's gonna come off. So, and know that line.
Very good. Anybody else? Another one?
Yeah.
All right. I'm mindful of the time, and...
I can do this all day when you
Yeah,
talk
I know,
about me.
but...
My favorite topic, but.
What time, Jim? What time are...
Oh, you're.
no, I'm okay.
No, you okay? Okay, all right.
10 minutes or
Go
so.
ahead.
All right, I was gonna ask, like, at Eastern, have you guys ever reached out to a professor for like a one-on-one conversation? And if so, like, do you remember the advice that professor gave you, and did it benefit you in a way that was like unexpected? And if not, like, would you have like a recommendation of what professor you would have reached out to, like, or like not a recommendation, like, would you have reached out to a professor thinking back to it now?
think of anything that I reached out to. I remember a number of points during class where I learned very practical things. So, you know, I would encourage you to, again, be curious and ask why. Or if you're learning something, why are you learning this? And I remember there was a presentations class, the only one I took in the communications building. I was thankful for that, but it looks like it's finally getting redone. But it was, you know, it was a presentation. It was at first I thought it was a boring class, but at the end of it, you know, he made a very important point of, we had a series of topics every time. You had to put together, you know, a presentation for it. And, you know, he made a point that, you know, if you're a salesperson, you only get 10 minutes of somebody's time. So if you take the first 10 minutes and you're not using it strategically, you're not going to get an 11th minute. There's no politeness in business. You get 10 minutes, especially if you're a salesperson or you're a solicitor. How many of us screen our calls, right? But if you're that, you know, you can get somebody's attention for 10 minutes, you got to script it, you got to make sure you get your points across, you got to make sure your verbal materials match your written materials, they tell a story, do you send it ahead of time? And the fact that, you know, he could have gone through the class and everybody would have had no idea why they got marked down because they only got to slide 5 of 10 in 10 minutes, but he went that extra mile to close the loop that, all right, why am I learning this and why is he so important about it? Because he made that point and made it very real. So if there's ever anything in class you're looking at and you're saying, why in the heck are we learning this? I'm never going to use it. You are. You're going to use it. But make sure you understand why, because otherwise you're going to learn it. Like my Spanish class, I learned it. I got an A. I couldn't do anything with it. But not that Spanish class wasn't important. But you know, make sure you understand why you're learning each little thing, because that way you can apply it. And then don't be afraid to ask questions. Everybody loves the questions that they ask and to share their knowledge. You really do.
Do you have an academic advisor? You have to pick an academic advisor? Yeah. So I picked an academic advisor, I think, because it was in my major in sociology. So, and you had to meet with the academic advisor. So I actually, you know, I picked the right one. So, you know, I don't know if you ever have a situation where you pick one and you're like, oh, this isn't working out, you can change. But, you know, was a person a big influence in my life? I don't think they were a huge influence, but it was in my major, and I had to do a practicum, so it was a person who guided me through that practicum. And it was someone you just got to trust because there was an older woman, so she was very experienced too. And I relied on that person's guidance. And so I think that was your question. And the other one was my coach. I played softball here, and it was really funny. Clyde Washburn, I don't know if you know him or ever knew him. He doesn't give you straight answers. He talks in like riddles. And so you ask a question, he'd tell you something in either a parable or a riddle, and you're walking away going, I think there's a lesson in that. I'm not quite sure. You know. Oh, and it, like 10 years later, it dawned on you. That's what it meant. I can't wait to tell him that. So that was my other one. You know, playing a sport like that was also. And I don't know what I would have done if I didn't like my academic advisor. I don't know if you're allowed to change them or not.
You are.
You should be. Probably back then, probably not. But they gave good guidance, you know. And I was telling, I think, at lunch, this is great that you have this opportunity to talk with, you know, alumni or whatever. And Michael's asked me to come back and do other things. And I always ask students, how'd you hear about this? Because I don't think they had it when I was going to school here. Had the opportunity to meet with alum and get some tips. So the more you see things hanging around this campus, go to them all. You know, because we like doing it, and it's a great opportunity. I never had that. You know, it was just like, you're done, here's your degree. And it was a different space and time back, 40 years. Right?
What about you, Andrew?
I mean, I always felt like my professors were open, and I don't remember any specific instance, but I know I went to speak with a number of different professors during office hours just to get clarification, and they were always open, and I always felt like I was, able to go talk to them when I was confused or concerned about something. So I would definitely encourage you to just, go see your professors during office hours if you have any questions or anything.
And you may need a letter of recommendation.
I did. I needed a letter of recommendation, and Dr. Packus gave me one. Absolutely.
So, any more questions? All right. I mean, you can stay around for a couple of minutes if anybody wants to talk to you personally. And if I were them, I would be asking for your business card, but I'm not them.
Wait, somebody connected with me on LinkedIn. Who was that?
Not here?
Not here? So, interesting, it's like the professional Facebook, right? LinkedIn, right? Only it doesn't have all those little, crazy little pictures on it. So it is a good tool. LinkedIn is a good tool. Somebody linked in with me the other day and said, "I'll see you here." And I think, I gotta watch out for creepers too, right? But I think it was, right? I suspect everybody. But, I do.
That's the other website.
I don't trust anyone, right? I just literally, on some of the LinkedIn, I'd say no. If I don't know you and you don't have like 20 connections with mine, the answer's no. But anyway, it is a good tool. But I can tell you this, there are times I'm interviewing people and they've linked in with me and I'm like, that's weird. So be careful how you use LinkedIn. Because I don't know why I thought that was weird, but it was. It's okay afterward, but I don't know, before it was like, I'm not sure. But anyway, it's a pretty good tool to use professionally, keep it professionally. And I think I asked Michael, there are sections down there that Eastern Connecticut has a LinkedIn section to stay connected with other Eastern Connecticut people, which I think is awesome. I think I'm gonna go join it right now, right? So that's a way to stay connected with somebody you have something in common with, which is going to school here. I mean, that's very important to keep to keep the connectivity of the school you went to. It's really, it makes an immediate bond when you meet people in the business. You went to Eastern? Oh, wow, do you know so-and-so? And you need to do that. That's very important.
One piece of unsolicited advice, and it just made me think about this, but, an interview, and do this once, do this forever. Well, first thing, LinkedIn is, that is the language of business. I don't have business cards. I haven't had them for 3 or 4 years now. You get so much more on LinkedIn. You can go right on and see it. But whenever you go on an interview, go look, maybe not friend request them or LinkedIn. Go look at their LinkedIn page. It sets you apart. So little things that set you apart. If you show up and you just spend 2 minutes looking, where did they go to school? What have they done in their career? Have they lived overseas? You're going to show to the person you're interviewing with that you've done some research, you know something, you're going to do the extra mile. And it's so easy to do. You should go on LinkedIn and you do it. But that little bit, that curiosity, all right, I'm going to interview with somebody, they're going to have a bunch of questions for me. How can I differentiate myself? You're always going to get, at the end of every interview, nearly every interview, somebody's going to say, do you have any questions for me? Come with a question. Look at their LinkedIn profile.
Don't ever say no.
I have a question. And think through that. And if somebody's going to say, wow, they took the time to go look. And again, it doesn't matter how you answer every other question, that's going to leave an impression.
Just real quick, it's funny, I made a LinkedIn yesterday, randomly. I just was looking up one of my professors and I did it. So I'm wondering, I don't have I have work experience in a restaurant and landscaping, but is it still good to start now and build that profile?
Absolutely.
Yeah, build a profile, make sure you know your audience, right? It's a business audience, so you're going to write articulately but briefly. Have a professional photo on there. Don't have one skydiving or something else. Have a professional photo on there. And, again, it's brevity, but it's how you articulate yourself in those kind of few sentences. And right now, your profile is going to have a lot more about your career interests and what you're looking to do than what you've done.
Right. Would you say you're a waiter?
And that's...
No, I worked in different aspects of restaurants.
Oh, like client services, right?
Yeah.
What you've learned there.
You just have to marketing. It's marketing. You just take a word and change it.
Yeah, it's not only the titles of the job. Actually, the titles of the job is the secondary thing. And what did you learn in the job? Okay, what are the things that I won't say transformed you, but have you learned anything there? It could be how to service, being punctual, taking responsibility for finishing projects, whatever it is. In every single job, I believe, even the job, it could be, you can be garbage collector, or we call it sanitation engineer, okay, you can demonstrate that you're a different person and you learn something from that job, and that's the key. Well, let me thank, on behalf of our students, on behalf of the university, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's a learning experience for me too, at the age of 71, okay, and we want you to come back, no question about it. We thank you from the bottom of our heart. Let's give them a